I've never known it this bad. I think the world is preparing for war. I'm despairing at the moment of where the United States is going and taking us.
Do you think that we can do things to prevent the catastrophes that you fear?
My biggest hope about the 21st century is my most reasonable hope. We'll scrape through, and there will be disasters and catastrophes along the way. And we might disrupt ourselves so much that a kind of peace will descend.
There's obviously a massive debate around freedom of speech. What is the biggest threat to your freedom of speech, do you think? Is it the right or the left? Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. Today's guest is a writer who, if not changing the whole world, certainly helped change the British novel as one of a group of writers in the 80s who began experimenting with style and subject. Ian McEwan's latest novel, What We Can Know, asks profound questions about who we are and where we're going, set in a future where the lowlands of the UK have been submerged by rising seas. We are now just an archipelago. Sir Ian McEwan, thank you for joining us. If you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
What I would love is a development that we can make some kind of peace for this thing that's coming down the track towards us, which is AI, artificial intelligence. We can't make it go away. We're going to have to live with it. It's going to infiltrate our lives on both the large scale and the personal scale. And what I would hope it would do, and what I hope we can do something about it ourselves individually, is see how it might help redefine ourselves as humans, and how this thing can remain a wonderful tool at our disposal. And I think it takes some exercise of mind for all of us as users. I heard for the first time how you can just write out a poem to an AI music software and ask it to set it as if sung by Frank Sinatra with a full orchestra. It was the first time I got really anxious, to be quite honest, because in a minute we had a perfectly orchestrated 7-chord song, sophisticated piano introduction, brass, mass strings, harmonies. How are we going to live with that, and how it will push us back onto a reckoning of what's essential about us that no machine could crowd out?
Have you tried asking ChatGPT to write in the style of Ian McEwan?
I think one of my children did.
Do you know what the outcome was?
It was shockingly mediocre. It was terrible. But that was 2 years ago, which is now a very long time.
Things have come a long way since
then. So that little moment of creative display was my first chill about this. And I think there are ways in which we can both distance ourselves, absorb it, but see it as a tool. Otherwise, I think we're going to lose something very, very rapidly. I mean, people talk about loss of attention spans and so on. I don't believe any of that. I think attention span is a biological matter. We can keep those. And anyway, you get on a plane moaning about attention spans, you're trusting yourselves to thousands of engineers as well as a pilot. We have all that. There has to be to recognize we have, let's say, 100 million neurons. Average connection is about 7,000 connections to each, running on the energy of a 25-watt light bulb. None of these machines are anywhere near that yet, and our connectivity within the mind is colossal. And somewhere in there we're going to be forced into reaching for the kernel of something. I'm not talking in religious terms. These machines will never be able to touch. And that's my optimism, that we will have some core. And we can pat ourselves on the back, say we've invented these extraordinary machines. We can now do things that we couldn't do before. It can help out with structures of proteins or with climate change planning and so on. But it's that core of our humanity I want it to hold up a mirror to us finally.
That it might help us actually work out what the essence of being human is.
And what we want. Yeah. what we want. We might have more leisure. We'd be thrown back on ourselves in big ways if we had more leisure.
What do you fear about its creativity? I mean, after all, if AI's creativity is simply based on the experience of all the things it's been fed into it, which is people and what people have written, people like you, how is it different to another?
Well, as things stands, even if you're combing the internet in the way you describe, it hasn't fallen in love, it hasn't caught cancer, hasn't broken a leg skiing irresponsibly at the age of 17, or all the things that cumulatively make us. It doesn't know what it is to be us, and there's a vast gap. It can simulate it. Now, Alan Turing way back said, in relation to the imitation game, if you can't tell if something is conscious, then you may as well treat it as if it were. We ourselves don't have the absolute proof that each other are conscious, but we rub along, and we have done for a long time, on the assumption that each other are conscious. So there's a gap, I think, and it's going to take more than just 2 years to leap across, and it might never be leapt across.
I mean, when you saw that thing, I think it was based on Suno, this artificial intelligence music app creating instant songs, which I think a lot of people found very scary, because it was surprisingly good. And you might similarly say, well, it lacked something, but it was pretty close.
It was surprisingly good, or you could put it another way around. It was surprisingly ordinary.
Yeah.
It was just like a lot of pop music. And of course, Tin Pan Alley onwards could turn out music with 3-chord songs and a middle eight, and it was almost like a computer.
Yeah.
They were working towards within a kind of tradition of an easy sound, and a lot of pop music I hear, because I'm no longer 16 and it doesn't thrill me the way the pop music of my generation did. It sounds totally formulaic and quite easy for Soniva or all the other programs to replicate.
But we know that a lot of young people are using AI in their schoolwork and their university work. And I mean, is there a brutal truth that because so many people are ordinary, that AI can probably do what a lot of people can do? What it can't do is what exceptional people like you do. Well, but for most of us, maybe it can muddle along.
AI could also, tell the teacher who has to mark that pile of essays what's being culled from the internet. So I think already that's happening. And maybe we're asking now the wrong kind of questions of children, asking them kinds of things that are much more difficult to cull from the internet. So that brings me back to this point of getting to some core, some pursuit. A pursuit of meaning is going to be refined to the pursuit of the core of what it means to be biological. I know the hard arguments against that, which say, well, we're all made of matter. If you take a materialist view, your brain is made of matter, stardust, and so is the machine. Why should we privilege a biological brain against a silicon brain, or whatever the material would be? That's quite an irresistible argument to a materialist like myself, but I think it's not the matter itself, it's what that matter does, and we're talking about the mind, not the brain. So, can we ever build a machine that has fallen in love, or has stubbed its toe in the middle of the night going to the bathroom? I think not. I think it's going to be very hard. They can pretend.
Do writers, I mean, writers don't always have to have experienced what they're writing about, do they?
Of course
they
not.
have to have experienced emotion, I suppose.
But they can project into worlds, and all the sum total of their embodiment and all their experiences make up that richness, which is the basis of all invention. The other thing is, we can read and hear things that were devised 2,700 years ago by Homer. We can sympathize with what's going on, even though as a culture, a warrior culture so remote from our own, that we'd be lost within it if we were time traveled. But for example, when Odysseus comes home And Penelope, who's been waiting for him all these years, doesn't even recognize him because he's a shaggy, bearded guy. And then he gets a little upset. And they have a little tiff, and then she puts him to the test. How was the wedding bed made? And he's able to tell her. But the little marital tiff is not quite over. So we can read that and understand it and feel it. There's some core that runs between Odysseus' time and our own through huge sort of manifestations and iterations. And it's that I think we're now going to be in pursuit of, that it will push us helplessly, I think, possibly, into a pursuit of that thing.
I mean, isn't it better that we don't find it? Because if we find it,
well,
then it can be replicated.
Well, no, the thing I'm dreaming of finding is irreplaceable. Possibly, yes. Someone hearing me in 300 years' time or even 50 years' time will think what a hopeless pursuit that was, because we can imitate anything. But that's the imitation game. That's the imitation. That's not the thing itself.
I mean, that brings us to the book, the new book, because what it identifies very, very early on is we're now in an age where everything is digital, everything is there for scholars theoretically in 100 years or 200 years to look at, to work out exactly what you were doing, what you were saying, who you were messaging, what you were thinking at the time, which is very, very different to where we are now in terms of how we look at the past.
Yes. Shakespeare is always a good point of reference here. What we know of Shakespeare is every other brush he had with authority. There are hundreds of books, thousands of books speculating about his life. We know nothing of his everyday existence. We know what happened when he had brushes with authority, buying tons of grain during a famine in Warwickshire and so on. The future is going to be absolutely buried in detail as long as supply chains exist and the internet carries on. Every last email, text, social media, interviews given by authors, it will be vast. Will it carry enough information for us? Because emails are curiously light on information. I'm on the train kind of thing. When we read the letters of Darwin or Napoleon, they're intensely reflective. They're all punctuated, capital letters, no shortage of full stops and colons. We get more in some sense and less in another sense. So possibly it swings and roundabouts, but I'm interested in speculating about the state of the humanities, history, aesthetics, literature, in an age in which we've managed to scrape through the next 100 years. We haven't had an all-out nuclear exchange. There have been catastrophes, no question about it, limited so-called nuclear exchanges.
And Britain doesn't exist as it does now.
Britain is the rising water, I wanted 85 metres, and you can't get that out of climate change. We're looking at 70 centimetres, maybe a whole metre if things go really badly. That'll be disastrous enough. But so I have a Russian nuclear weapon, a very big one, falls short of southwest United States and falls into the mid-Atlantic, and there's a colossal set of tsunamis that invade Western Africa, Europe, and the eastern seaboard of the United States. But it seemed quite conceivable, because our times are so interesting, that supply chains have been disrupted, industrial civilization is under some kind of meltdown, and Britain is a rather sleepy set of archipelagos. And Scotland is a rather dangerous place to go. And yet we scrape by. We still have our universities, and the humanities departments are rather seedy compared to the technology.
Well, the Oxford and Cambridge seem to be underwater and lost.
They're underwater.
We're now with the University of the South Downs.
The University of South Downs, so a nice long 40-mile Long Island, an academic whose main interest is to look at our time. He's interested in a particular poet, very famous poet, Francis Blundy. I wanted to come at a speculation of the future from the point of view of someone who really envied us, who envied our literature, who still thought there was so much in our nature, our living environment, that he would adore to have partaken in. He saw us at the point in which it could have gone either way. It went a bad way, but not so bad as people thought. There wasn't the total nuclear meltdown that we used to dread about and write about in the 70s and 80s. But disparate wars, never lasting too long. Also putting a great deal of dust in the air, and global temperatures drop 1 or 2 points, get another crack at climate change. Highly nuanced optimism. And also, I'm interested in those experiments that are happening all over the world, that always fill my heart with joy. Rewilding, or the 100 square miles off the coast of Scotland, now 7 or 8 years old, no fishing in there, no bottom scraping, industrial fishing either. And biologists have been amazed at the pushback of plant life, marine life in those areas. And I think human culture is a bit like that as well. We are quite resilient. I grew up in the shadow of the Second World War. Somewhere between 80 and 100 million people died in it. Probably the first major war in which far more civilians died than soldiers. And yet, and in 1945, European cities were in total ruin, 12, 15 million people displaced. It looked like the end of the world. Jump 30 years, and it's all kind of coming back. Tokyo, that was burnt to the ground 3 times over, is bustling again. And although collective memories keep those wars alive, daily life pushes on. And as one of the characters says, whether Jack gets his Jill becomes more important day on day than whatever happened at Thermopylae. And I imagine the past, looking back on the 21st century, thinking, that was really hard, in the way that we look back on the first half of the 20th. But they still just about scrape through. That's what I find missing in science fiction. So this is science fiction without the science, with the history, with the humanities, and with Jack either getting his Jill, or Jill betraying Jack, or getting her Jack. And how much we can know about it. And even how much we can know about each other in the present too, which is why there's a long episode about the tragedy of Alzheimer's, not only for the victim but for the carer. That slow loss of the past, as it were, the memory, is like a death within a living body. And I've experienced it closely in my own family. I think my mother died long before she was dead. And many, many more people now are experiencing this, because we're living longer.
Yes, it's an extraordinary epidemic.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's aside, it sounds surprisingly optimistic and rather hopeful. Have you,
2 or 3 nuclear wars. Yeah. Well, yes.
Well, survival, human survival, and what it is to be human.
It's nuanced optimism.
Is it? Well, because you're not known for that. But this.
Yeah. Well, I think as you get older, there are 2 ways to go. You either think the world is coming to an end because I'm coming to an end, or you think I want the project to survive because I've got grandchildren. We've heard it many times. I used to groan when I heard old people say that. But
as you say, a lot of the story is about this poet of now, with people looking back on him 100 years away. I suppose people will do that about you, and I suppose you must be thinking about that to some degree.
I don't think about it much. It's out of my hands, and I'm not a great believer in the afterlife. I know that things will be very much like before I was born.
But you're one of the few who has an afterlife, I think, guaranteed, and that's not. Most people don't have that. But you.
Yeah, my idea of a proper afterlife would be in some luscious bit of countryside for eternity, in a state of perpetual joy, maybe with a harp, or of course as that famous cartoon has it, people arriving in hell were greeted with the words, "Welcome to hell, here's your accordion." I know that's very rough on accordion players, but still, being alive in the minds of others is not, to me, an afterlife. So, yes, of course.
Do you find yourself being, wishing more that there was an afterlife as you get older?
Imagine living for eternity. Yeah. The writer who wrote marvellously on this was John Updike, thinking of all the little things that roll around in his mind he's going to have there forever. Like a stupid rhyme he heard early in his life. "I'm biding my time because that's the kind of guy I'm." A terrible rhyme, in other words. And he speculates, he was a believer, that you're going to have to carry this around forever and ever. Although he could not make what he called the great leap of unfaith, he remained a believer. I never could believe that he believed in an afterlife. So no, I don't wish for it, and it's not available anyway to be wished for.
So to the disasters that have come in this story, I mean, how much do you fear that they are real? You know, that we are on the way to perhaps some sort of nuclear calamity, geopolitical strife?
Well, I've always been a news junkie. I've followed it all my life. I've always been moaning and groaning like everyone else about the present, but I've never known it this bad. I think the world is preparing for war. I keep hearing people say, quoting Renatus Flavius, I think it was, who said, if you want peace, you prepare for war. Well, that's a partial truth, because if you end up with war, it's because you've prepared for it, is also true. I see the rise of autocratic states pressing in, and Europe looking very frail. It could be the last remnant of the idea of an open society with its own pressures from the populist right. Like many people, I'm despairing at the moment of where the United States is going and taking us. Watching those leaders, North Korea, China, Russia, and their various followers. Istanbul was there. Istanbul in relation to, and Hungary. It's not looking great. And one danger of AI is it's going to be inserted into the preparations of launch capabilities of nuclear weapons. And I think that's really going to be an extraordinary matter. We will perhaps lose that command and control and that set of voices that have to flow upwards.
Well, we already may be seeing that in modern warfare. There was a story, I don't know whether you saw, it about Israeli targeting of how it finds people it suspects of being linked to Hamas, and that AI is involved in that process.
Absolutely. So warfare and AI, I think, are to bring us back to the beginning, will really push.
Well, I mean, Trump's changing his Department of Defense to a Department of War, isn't it?
Well, we had a War Department for a long time, but then we fought a lot of wars. So I'm not much comforted by the words of Renatus. It's one of those clever truths that run alongside its exact opposite. You want a war, prepare for war. And we learnt in all the remembrances of the First World War in the last few years how no one wanted a war, and we sleepwalked into one. I don't find much trustworthy reason among our leaders. I think that's the frightening thing. Expansionist Russia, its 11 time zones, wanting to take another country in. My biggest hope about the 21st century is my most reasonable hope. We'll scrape through, and there will be disasters and catastrophes along the way. And we might disrupt ourselves so much that a kind of peace will descend. That would be it. as my academic says to himself, or to his lover, the only reason we're not at war is we don't have any metal. You know, it's all underwater, pulling up old vans and stuff to melt down for.
And human life will be much harder, and we won't have many of the things that we have now.
No oranges in winter, all those things we take for granted. Possibly no anesthetics. My biggest dread of having suddenly being projected back into the 17th century would be, you know, having appendicitis or toothache. We have to remember, for example, Pepys had a bladder stone, and it was driving him nuts. He couldn't write anymore. He got the best top doctor in London. So a couple of people to hold him down, shot of brandy. Then that doctor made a very quick incision in his perineum, then groped around for his bladder with filthy hands, got the stone out, stitched up the bladder, stitched up the perineum in 45 seconds. That's why he was the top surgeon. Okay, so that's why I want my guy to remind us, in envying us, all our blessings. In the developed world, as long as you're not too poor, the oranges in winter and the anesthetics are extraordinary blessings. We have hot water flowing out of taps. Our excrement is washed away in a pull of a handle. Medieval kings would envy us, and so will the future.
As a writer, you know, there's obviously a massive debate around freedom of speech. What is the biggest threat to your freedom of speech, do you think? Is it the right or the left?
The left stuff is sort of annoying and trivial, and it's only a portion of the left. The right stuff, I think, because it contains strong elements of racism, xenophobia, and disbelief in climate change, it seems almost automatic. They all seem to go together. That level of mistrust of science, I think, is the most dangerous element. And climate change will eventually affect everyone's free speech. That, I mean, it will really close us down. Authoritarian governments, of course, will do so. The big question, I think, for us is how recoverable this is. And I think of a Borges story, Garden of the Forking Paths, and about how there are these two paths you go down, but once you're down one, it's irrecoverable to get back down the other. So is Trump just a blimp, and it leads Americans to realize how urgent it is to reform their constitution? Or can they not find any way back because the constitution is actually so weak that it's permitted these extraordinary degrees of concentration of power? Who knows? But at the moment, it doesn't look great, I have to say. And
do you think we can do things to prevent the catastrophes that you fear, or you know, are these things beyond control, that they have a life of their own?
Well, I'd say lock down, in this particular instance, the American voter. That's something they can all do. They don't have a structured opposition. There's no loyal opposition in the States. Where are the Democrats? They're all over the place. Yeah. So maybe that's the first thing they've got to fix. Look back at our 1688 and say, we're going to have some rules to rein in the power of the monarch.
Sir Ian McEwan, thank you very much indeed.